Hey everyone, let's jump right into the explainer. Today, we're taking those incredibly dense, high-level organizational theories and breaking them down into highly practical, bite-sized examples, stuff you'll actually recognize in your own daily work life. So if you've ever wondered why your team acts the way it does, or why certain workplace problems just seem, well, impossible to solve, you're definitely in the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today's micro to macro journey. 1. Perspectives in the workplace. 2. Individual perception and biases. 3. The mechanics of learning. 4. Sparking creativity with Scamper. 5. Navigating organizational culture. And 6. Projects versus daily operations. Let's get to it.
Section 1. Perspectives in the workplace, the blind men and the elephant. The absolute fundamental rule of organizational behavior is that how we view an organization depends entirely on the perspective we assume. To really lock this concept in, the source text recounts the famous parable of the 6 blind wise men of India. So they encounter an elephant for the very first time. The first man touches the tusk and goes, "It's a spear." The second feels the tall, flat side and says, "No, it's a wall." The third grabs the leg, "It's a tree." The fourth feels the trunk, "A snake." The fifth touches the ear, "A fan." And the sixth touches the tail and declares it's a rope. Now, the truth is, all the wise men were partly right but entirely wrong as a whole. They were literally victims of their limited perspective. So before we get into the heavier concepts today, I want to ask you a direct question. What part of the organizational elephant are you holding? Think about it. If you work in marketing, your view of the company is entirely different from someone working in IT or HR. You might think you're holding a snake, while they're absolutely convinced they're holding a wall. Keeping this in mind is absolutely crucial as we zoom in on how individuals actually operate. Moving right along to Section 2, Individual Perception and Biases, How We See the Workplace. Let's shift to the micro level here and explore the psychological filters individuals use to interpret their environment. Our first academic concept is stereotyping. We all know the word, but formally, this is judging someone based on your perception of the group they belong to. In organizations, this filter significantly skews our reality. It's basically an interpretation key our brain uses just to save energy, but man, it often leads to highly inaccurate conclusions. So what does this actually sound like in practice? Our source material provides these everyday workplace examples. You might hear comments like, "Men aren't interested in childcare," or "older workers can't learn new skills," or "Asian immigrants are hardworking and conscientious." Whether the assumption feels negative or even seemingly positive, the individual is completely ignored in favor of a generalized blanket group assumption. Another really critical concept is the halo effect. This happens when we draw a broad, general impression about an individual based on just a single characteristic. It's kind of crazy how easily our brains take this shortcut. How does this actually play out at work? Well, imagine a standard performance review. A manager might rate an employee as excellent across the board, time management, technical skills, leadership, simply because that employee is incredibly friendly and outgoing. That single positive trait of sociability creates a literal halo over everything else, unfairly coloring the whole performance review. Section 3. The Mechanics of Learning, Classical versus Operant. Now that we know how we perceive things, how do we actually learn new behaviors and get motivated on the job? When we talk about learning, organizational psychology highlights 2 distinct approaches. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the clear visual distinction between classical and operant conditioning. Let's break these down. The concept of classical conditioning is learning through association. The classic example, of course, is the Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov. He taught dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell by associating it with meat. The bell alone eventually caused the reaction. But the workplace? It's largely driven by operant conditioning, which is learning through consequences. For example, if a worker puts in overtime and the consequence is the boss's praise, that positive reinforcement makes the worker highly likely to repeat those overtime hours. It's a vital distinction, association versus consequence. Section 4. Sparking creativity with Scamper, Team problem solving. Let's zoom out a bit from the individual to the team level. When a group needs to innovate, how do they actually do it? Enter the Scamper framework. It's a highly practical toolkit for group creativity. Basically, a brilliant way to make an existing idea better. Let's walk through the first 3 letters. S stands for substitute. The question is, what else instead? Take a standard hot dog, substitute the meat, and boom, you have vegetarian hot dogs. C is combine. How about a blend? Combine a greeting card and a microchip, and you get those musical cards that get stuck in your head for days. A is adapt. How can I adjust to this? Take a standard tire, adapt it for winter weather, and you have snow tires. It's a fantastic way to systematically force creative solutions. But a team using Scamper doesn't just magically work perfectly on day one. Groups evolve in a linear progression known as the stages of team development. First is forming, where you manage individual entry. It's polite, but a bit awkward, you know? Next is storming, where expectations clash and conflict inevitably arises. Then comes norming, where the team finally establishes standards and manages relations. Only then do they reach performing, where the focus shifts entirely to task completion and continual improvement. Section 5. Navigating organizational culture, complexity, and ambiguity. Let's transition to the macro level here and look at the massive environmental forces shaping a company's culture. Two major concepts really dominate the modern business landscape. The first is complexity. This is a situation with highly interconnected parts and overwhelming variables. The key distinction with complexity is that the information actually is available, but there's just so much of it, it's incredibly difficult to process. To ground this complexity concept, our source provides a perfect example: global working. Imagine a global business trying to deliver a service across 15 different countries. You have the data on all of them, but you have to juggle fluctuating currencies, vastly different cultural norms, and wildly differing international labor laws all at once. That is the true essence of complexity. The second macro concept is ambiguity. While complexity means having too much data, ambiguity is defined by having, well, absolutely no prior data. Actually, scratch that. It's about having no precedents. These are the unknown unknowns, situations that are nearly impossible to predict because you have absolutely nothing to look back on. And the clearest example of ambiguity from our text is moving into a newly emerging market with a brand new product range. Think about it. If you're launching a completely unprecedented product line, unlike anything you've manufactured before, in a region where you've never done business, you can't rely on past data. You are operating in total ambiguity. Section 6. Projects versus daily operations. Categorizing work. So, faced with individual bias, team dynamics, complexity, and ambiguity, how do organizations actually categorize the work they do to manage all this? Well, they separate work into two distinct buckets. First up, the project. A project is strictly defined as a set of tasks carried out within a stipulated time frame to achieve a unique objective. The keywords here are time frame and unique. A project has a built-in expiration date. And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast. Projects are completely unique and time-bound, like planning a wedding or constructing a bridge. Once the bridge is built, the project is done, over. Operations, on the other hand, are the exact opposite. They are repetitive and ongoing. The endless cycle of an assembly line in a manufacturing plant or the daily cleaning of a corporate building are prime examples of operations. They don't have an end date. They just keep the lights on. We've covered an incredible amount of ground today, from the individual mind right up to corporate operations. But I want to conclude this explainer by leaving you with one final provocative question drawn from the text. In what domains do you hold power, and how does it influence those around you? Whether it's your home, your team, or your company, you are part of the organizational elephant. How is your perspective and your power shaping the people you interact with every single day? Take that thought with you. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.